This week, the 19th package of sanctions against Russia will be introduced. 3 key sectors for the Kremlin will be targeted: Russian energy, financial services, and trade. But the most important decision of the European Union is that the European Union has finally prepared an agreement on a complete ban on the supply of Russian gas. The new rules will come into effect gradually, starting this year. The complete phase-out of all Russian energy resources should be finished by the end of 2027. And even despite the dreams of Donald Trump and his circle to restart the Nord Streams, the European Union has stated that even after the war ends, the Union will maintain the ban on purchasing Russian gas and oil. And also, the leaders of the European Union are ready to share the financial and legal risks of providing Ukraine with so-called reparations. This means that over the next 3 years, Ukraine will still receive 140 billion euros from frozen Russian assets. My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is October 20th. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start this episode, I ask you to subscribe to this channel. Please like this video, leave any comment below, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so financially with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. It says there, support the channel Alexei Pechi. Choose any format that is convenient for you. I will be grateful for any support you can give. So, this is a decision that has been awaited for a very long time. The energy ministers of the European Union countries at a meeting in Luxembourg today finally agreed on a common position regarding a new law that will put an end to Europe's dependence on Russian fuel by the end of 2027. According to the draft, supplies of Russian gas under short-term contracts must be stopped by mid-June next year. That means it's literally half a year. And then, in another 18 months, everything must be shut down. Deals under long-term agreements. That means by the end of 2027, not a single drop of Russian gas should be coming into Europe from Russia. But still, for some landlocked countries like Hungary and Slovakia, a temporary exemption has been provided. Well, and such a concession is more of a formality, because this European Union initiative to abandon Russian gas only requires a qualified majority of votes, so it can be approved even if some members object. In fact, 25 out of 27 European Union countries voted in favor of abandoning Russian gas by the end of 2027. But that's more than enough. That means Hungary and Slovakia are left on their own. And it's important to note here that right now the United States is insisting on accelerating the break of Europe's energy ties with Moscow and increasing purchases of American liquefied gas. And in the joint statement by the European Union and the United States, they talk about plans to sign an agreement. Accredited funds for salaries in general should amount to $750 billion over the next 3 years. As stated by the European Union Commissioner for Energy, Dan Jorgensen, quote, "We are working closely with the American administration in the field of energy. We are actively diversifying our sources of gas imports." By the way, it's worth noting one very important detail here, how the European Union, let down Donald Trump. Let me remind you that there were rumors that people from Donald Trump's inner circle were negotiating with the Russians about jointly restarting the Nord Stream pipelines after the end of Russia's war against Ukraine and supplying Russian gas to Europe. So the Americans wanted to get control of the pipeline, and the Russians would once again get access to the European market to sell Russian gas. But that very same European Union Energy Commissioner Dan Jorgensen adds, and I quote, "The European Union does not plan to resume imports of Russian gas even if a peace agreement is signed between Ukraine and the Russian Federation. In my opinion, in the future, we should not import a single molecule of Russian energy resources, and this is a very, very important signal that needs to be sent. But the process of phasing out Russian gas is not yet complete. After the member states coordinate their positions, negotiations will begin with the European Parliament, which is now demanding a faster phase-out not only of gas, but also of oil from Russia. They say let's shut everything down completely starting next year. And if the European Parliament votes for the current version of the bill, the phase-out will have to happen by the end of 2027. And so the European Commission is offering a compromise here. Let's, they say, ban the import of Russian liquefied natural gas by the end of the current 2025. And as for the remaining supplies, let's keep them for now and gradually phase them out by the end of 2027. And here it is. Currently, about 15% of liquefied natural gas supplies to Europe come from Russia, making it the second largest supplier after the United States. European Union countries spend 500 to 700 million euros per month on Russian gas. But energy ministers at the meeting in Luxembourg today also discussed issues of energy support for Ukraine, since Russia is still trying to plunge the country into a blackout. By the way, in this whole story, it's worth mentioning Austria because it was this country that blocked the 19th package of sanctions, which includes the very ban on purchasing Russian gas. So Austria demanded to unfreeze part of Russia's frozen assets in order to compensate for the losses of Austria's Raiffeisen Bank International at their expense. This bank suffered because of the fines imposed on it by the Russian regime. That's why Austria was demanding to unfreeze Russian money, so they could take a little bit for themselves and cover Raiffeisen Bank's losses. However, other countries expressed resistance to this demand. The sanctions package needed unanimous approval from all 27 members, and Austria deserves credit. It lifted its blockade, even though its bank has not yet received compensation for its losses. And I'll add one more piece of news. The leaders of the European Union are ready to share the financial and legal risks of providing Ukraine with the so-called reparations loan. As stated in the draft decision of the European Union Leaders Summit, this is to meet Ukraine's needs for the next 2 years. The leaders of the European Union have asked the European Commission to present a proposal regarding the possible use of remaining cash linked to the frozen assets of the Russian Federation. It is stated that the proposals must comply with European Union legislation and international law, as well as take into account the distribution of risks among member states. This is a very important point because Belgium, where more than 180 billion euros in cash are held due to the immobilization of Russian assets, has generally not objected to their use after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But in Belgium, they want other European Union countries to share. These 180 billion euros in cash equal a third of the country's gross domestic product, which is a serious burden. And Belgium says, listen, if problems arise, why should only we be responsible for this? No, let's say, if we're going to take risks, then everyone should take risks. Well, Belgium wants other European Union countries to share the risks among themselves, and so the European Union leaders agreed to divide the risks equally among everyone. Ukraine will get a 140 billion euro loan backed by frozen Russian assets. Ukraine will be required to repay this money only after Russia fully pays all reparations for the invasion. And if it doesn't, then Europe will simply take these frozen assets for itself to cover Ukraine's debt. And now it has already been decided that the collective risk will be assumed by the G7 countries in Europe. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye. To be continued.